Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we're talking about what it means to make a business process model consumable, or to put it another way, how to make sure all the work that goes into your organization's process modeling doesn't get ignored by the people meant to use it. My guest on this episode is Shrikanth Balla. He is the product lead for Mavim Portal. Mavim is the sponsor of this episode, and we talk with Shrikanth about the consumption side of business process modeling and how it has evolved in recent years. Shrikanth shares some perspective on how he is seeing Mavim customers using portals to serve their process initiatives, including work on building digital twins. And he shares more about portals and process consumption in the context of Dynamics ERP and CRM solutions, as well as Power Platform. All right. Well, Shrikanth, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Jason.
I thought we could start with just a little bit of an introduction about yourself and the work you do at Mavim.
Sure. I'm Shrikanth Balla. Joined Mavim last September. I'm a product manager there, handle their consumption platform. It's called Mavim Portal. And apart from that, I do a lot of value engineering work for them. That is more from the point of view of product evangelization and hearing the customers and see what can be translated back into the product. So this is something which I do at Mavim at this moment. But prior to that, I have 15 years of industry experience with Microsoft in various roles. The last one was business program manager with them in shared business operations space.
Excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to learning a little more about what you do and some of your outlook on things. You mentioned consumption, and I know that concept is very important in your planning in the product that you manage. Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about what a portal is from Mavim's perspective, and maybe the point of it as you see it?
Of course. So the portal, as I was saying, that it's a consumption platform. It's the location or the interface where the customers of ours they see the visualizations of their business processes which they have modeled. Along with that, it also acts as their knowledge repository and the relationship indication around the business processes. So it's in a nutshell, it's a place where everybody in an organization is welcome to know about a process, what it does, where with whom it does, and what are the implications of changing that process. So you learn, you collaborate, and you consume. So that's what Portal in a nutshell is.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those sort of critical pieces that maybe could easily be missed, I think, as executives perhaps and managers do process modeling or planning for their business processes, or outline, or even diagramming them or defining them. It doesn't always reach the people who need to really know what the ideal process or what the approved processes are, or what really runs a business, right? So this is kind of one of those missing components, or potentially missing components.
I agree with you. So most of the times, from my experience and the interactions which I had with other colleagues of mine in this particular sector or area, we have seen that when the businesses try to transform, they look at it from one angle, right? So that's majorly from the top down, or that they want to achieve an XYZ goal. But what they miss, or mostly it just goes down the priority list, is whom they are building this for, or whom they are designing or modeling this process for. So that's where components like this or interfaces like Portal come into play, and that to enable that communication of what the organization is thinking and doing, and how can that benefit the end user from the point of view of that organization, whomever they are designing it for. So yes, and consumption is a pretty critical component in any aspect. Think about it, right? So that's what we try to bridge.
I know that you've also mentioned, as we're sort of planning this discussion, that a lot of it is to serve in initiatives related to digital twins. Can you explain a little bit more about? I'm always curious to know how people define how different kinds of companies define what a digital twin is and what the value of it is. What do you think of for digital twin in this context?
Sure. So let's go to the fundamental concept of a digital twin, right? So a digital twin is just a blueprint of your organization, department, team, or for that matter, even an individual process, uh, where it can be pulled out from the people process tools into a mind map. Maybe sometimes it could be just a blueprint stored somewhere, right? That's the digital twin of an uh, organization, department, or a process. Now, when we are talking about DTOs, it's Uber. Like say that's the highest level where the organizational blueprint comes in the form of a digital process where it's like a algorithm, right? It's like a step by step of every department, every process, and how they are interacting with them. And that's in that initiative is where Mavim plays a major role. And of course, we were talking about consumption a while back, so consumption plays a major role as well.
So when a digital twin of an organization has, let's say, has been created and maybe is being, I don't know if it. I'd like to know if it, does it continue to sort of evolve over time? And then what is really the consumption perspective if you're thinking of it from someone using a portal to sort of find their place in that digital twin and sort of understand how it defines their role.
So when you design or when you venture out into creating a digital twin of your organization, Jason, what's your end goal? Usually it is that, okay, you would like to improve that process, or maybe you are like looking at getting an inventory of what you have in the huge organization you're running, right? So the awareness is the first step in the DTOs, right? So once you get an awareness, we know that, okay, this particular process is supposed to function this way, giving this output and serve this particular user persona, but maybe it's deviating. And how do we come to that conclusion of deviating? When somebody actually goes ahead and looks at it and confirms that this process is what I expected and it is what I use, and this is something which is functioning, yes, in a right way, or no, it's deviation. There's a lot of deviation where I'm experiencing pain points. So that's how the consumption in DTOs come into play. Now, when we do this particular digital transformation the digital twin for the digital transformation purpose, where you're trying to improve, so you already have your awareness. Now you would like to take it to the next step, which is how can you take it and improve it as a to be process, right? Now, based on the consumption feedback or the user feedback, voice of the user, as we call it, so we try to plan, hey, this process, let's take it and maybe break it down, or maybe like extend it further to alleviate this pain point, which is, of course, data driven, of course, confirmed by the end users who are consuming it. And you also have multiple uh, mul- relationships where it is going to impact and where it's going to benefit you. And that's how you put the next variation out. And again, the cycle repeats. So you have your users using it, confirming that, hey, this is good. The new version is good. It's the same process how we do upgrades to a website, or maybe upgrades to a product. It's the same way how we can treat a digital transformation process as well.
I can imagine that being a really valuable tool to have, especially in much more highly complex change scenarios, like, for example, trying to unify or harmonize processes across newly acquired offices, or just workers in different places, different countries, or different divisions. For example, when the executive decision is to really define business process across the organization.
That's true, and you mentioned a very great point there: harmonizing the processes, right? So as any organization expands, there are always new ways of working. There's always something which differs from geography to geography due to probably the geographical regulations, or maybe the culture, or maybe the process understanding of the staff in that particular region, or maybe completely different reason altogether. But when we are, like say, trying to harmonize this process, or get a single way of working, the end goal, of course, is to benefit uh, across the organization of repeatability and predictability, right? That's something which we bring in, and that's one of the ultimate goals of transformations as well. So they would like to not just iron out the wrinkles, but also make sure they are very much predictable. They can predict what's going to happen in the next few quarters, of course, and based on the usage, and repeatable, so that there's a consistency and there is no breakages or no escalations from the field coming back to the organization for the change, which is majorly called change management and resistance to the change in the real world, right? So that's a great point you made there about harmonizing the process.
So to your last point, I can imagine that there's a lot of value in knowing that that workers, that teams have an outlet to sort of constructively share what about process, what about the creation of those processes has worked well for them, or when there are issues that they can't abide by it for some reason, due to the existing processes, other systems that don't allow it, people and roles that don't match it. I don't know. I'm just thinking of different ways that some group might not be able to follow sort of the official the process as it's laid out, especially if it's supposed to be applied to lots of different diverse teams. And the other thing that occurs to me is this is sort of like the best potential way to handle these kinds of things. Whereas maybe the other side of the spectrum would be, someone from the corporate office or drops a new like binder on a table and says, "Here's your new process," and follow it. And there's really no recourse or no way to change it easily. This is, I think, trying to find the full other side of that spectrum, where it's the potential for change and the potential for actually managing that is fairly robust. Is that one of the values here of a consumption model?
Yes, that's right. So, like you said, the binder on the table, that's usually what happens in some format or the other. So, getting together everybody on what has been done, or making them aware, is the first step towards the success of a digital transformation, right? The communication, that could be a pain point when the organizations are large and spread across the globe, and usually, it also can cause delays in adapting to the change. So the more you can get the communication out earlier, and also at an early stage of the development, and at all stages of the process change, the better. That I would say that.
Sure. I think the next logical sort of question I would have in this for this topic is really where it fits in with the execution systems at an organization. And for our purposes, I'm typically thinking of Dynamics, a Dynamics product, a CRM, an ERP, perhaps Power Platform, where these systems are really executing the processes and ultimately have to represent the processes too, for the real work that's being done. How do you sort of approach that side of it?
A good question, Jason. And Dynamics, for that matter, is not just an execution engine, right? So fundamentally, it was first drafting the existing customer process. So we call it gaps, or fit gaps, as the dynamic nomenclature goes, right? I used to be a consultant for Dynamics, or AX 2012, back in the day. So we used to do this process design workshops as the very first discovery stage of the project. And then we used to document them, create a repository, and then we start working on the changes for the implementation. And once we do that, that's where your Dynamics forms or your end implemented results will show up, where users are using it, maybe like performing the execution of their tasks on a day-to-day basis. But uh, if you look at the whole cycle on the project implementation for the Dynamics as well, it is starting from this design, and it is very much necessary for them who are on these projects as well to have that the base foundational processes or fits or even gaps for that matter identified and communicated, like we were discussing a little while back, so that everybody on the project or even the people on the field who are going to execute and use this are aware that what's going to change, what's going to hit them once the implementation is completed. So that will benefit one, the organization which is implementing the Dynamics, and of course it also reduces the effort on the change management for that matter.
Yeah, when you talk to, I don't know, Dynamics implementing partners, or even Microsoft customers who use a Dynamics solution, what's your recommendation in terms of how a product like your portal sort of fits into their efforts? Is it something that's best started the sooner the better, and use it ideally even have some processes ready to consume before work on an ERP or a CRM or another system is underway? Is that the ideal?
No, the sooner the better. I mean, if you ask me, the sooner the better, because usually all the implementation partners have their own global templates, if you may call them, and they would like to represent that as a leverage point when they are implementing the projects at the customer end, isn't it? Now, when they want to showcase this, they cannot carry them in set of files, or maybe like you cannot open up a repository which is okay. Just go through this particular list and see what benefits out of you. There should be an intuitive and interactive user experience for the customer to understand and look and feel how this process flows. It's not just set of diagrams. It's not set of documentation around the particular process flow or the steps, saying that one after the next. It doesn't benefit the customer. So make it as interactive as possible. If you use Portal or any other platform for that matter, the intuitiveness and interactiveness of the business processes will actually benefit the customer to see it sort of alive rather than a static diagram. That's what my recommendation would be. And of course, start using platforms like this early on. Don't bring it in when they are already done with the discussions and implementation is going to begin, because that's where a lot of mistakes happen, because you have already decided on a solution, because you have discussed, but you have documented it as per your understanding without going back and communicating with the customer team again and again. So this will benefit if you bring that in early on. It will benefit the implementation as well as the implementation partner.
That makes sense. I can certainly see the value of an implementation partner having these tools ready to go, and either some pre-built processes that either they can build from for each individual client, or industry specific, or whatever. And the other, well, I'll just share sort of a working theory I've been thinking about recently, because we're in this generation with Microsoft, enterprise software in particular, with the dynamic systems, where it's just almost like a whole sort of era here where upgrade sort of hangs over so many customers, whether they're coming from AX to the cloud, CRM to the cloud, or just a third party, other legacy software, and they're looking at Dynamics 365. This on-prem to cloud, obviously such a big decision. It's not the same for everybody. But in that time when companies are deciding if and when they'll make that kind of a change, there's so many things they can do to, I guess, at a smaller step, because an ERP migration is such a massive expense in many cases. But I think these steps like business process, creating a digital twin, as you call it, of the organization, and then other technological things in other areas too that could be done in the short term that would greatly benefit those cloud migration plans down the road. I think there's like a whole, I don't know, in my view, there's this whole sphere of sort of these kinds of investments that this certainly seems like it would fit into, or efforts that are so worthwhile for the future.
That's true. And when an implementation is starting, I would say go small. That has been my experience as a consultant, as a program manager, now even as a product manager. So first step is awareness, fundamental, as we have discussed a little while back. Next step is, of course, know your audience or know your end user, so that you design or make an improvement in a right direction rather than having it just top down, right? So most of the times we miss that part. We don't know the roles who are going to use it. We don't know the people or the personas who are going to use it, how they are using it. So once you have the awareness or the business processes which are laid out or in your own repository in any format, you can make sure to connect the dots with the personas and then plan your extensions or maybe hyper automation or maybe completely redesigning the process for that matter, right? So a lot of times we miss that intermediate step of knowing your users, and we start to automate because of the volumes. Like, say, let's take an example. Like, an organization in sales is trying to automate to reduce the number of steps in the sales process, and they are like, okay, let's automate and make sure it is the most quickest process ever. But will it help? Will it add value to the end customer, not just the implementation, but end customer? Because once you do this, it's a 6 months implementation, a year implementation, sometimes two. But after that, your end users have to use it for the next 5 to 10 years, maybe. So will it be adding value there? So getting to that value, reducing the cost in by reaching the right value is something which is a question everybody needs to ask. But before that, fundamentals: start small, get the awareness of what your inventory is, then know your customer personas and design for that. So that's the steps I would take in any implementation.
Is there anything else, with sort of a specific eye on sort of what Microsoft is doing these days that you wanted to mention that relates to your work right now?
Yes, the Power Platform, which is like the exciting stuff coming out of Microsoft Arsenal, right? So they have been doing brilliant stuff around the platform itself, with adding more and more capabilities, more and more intelligence around it. So it's making it very easy and also very tempting for a lot of customers to go ahead first with just the hyper automation or the low code, no code automation for using Power Platform. Uh, Explore it, but like I said, but use it judiciously when you require it. It's super exciting, super powerful, and we have done few case studies and use cases to showcase to the customer, saying that, hey, this is a possibility. If you want to extend the platform, what Mavim offers, you could do that using Power Platform. But at the end of the day, you will anything which you are creating, like we started this discussion with consumption, anything you are creating is to be consumed. And if you create it just for the sake of it, and it's not getting consumed, and it's just an overhead, at the end of the day, you will end up doing another round of digital transformation in coming couple of years. So that's something which I would ask the audience, whoever is using these new tools which are exciting from Microsoft, to be very careful about, very cautious about, and use them to the right strength of these platforms. They are very powerful.
Yeah, very, very interesting point. And I think I hear what you're saying there. It's an area where I think a lot of organizations really are coming to terms with those types of questions, making those decisions as you suggest. So certainly something to watch for the future. Shrikanth, anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up? This has been a really interesting conversation to hear this perspective on something that I think affects essentially every organization.
No, I would like to just summarize whatever we have started the discussion with and we ended with, right? So, if you are a user of the transformation platforms, think about customers, the end users whom you're designing it for. So that's the first step. Second, always keep consumption in mind, because you're creating the transformation or the process for an end user who is there in the first step, right? It's not to be stored in one separate location to be looked at the next transformation, which we are going to do. So always keep the communication going and make sure that you are on the right track where you are addressing the right pain points, so that you have your user adoption coming in and you are making sure your transformation is successful. Third step is, of course, start with fundamentals. Get the awareness of what's there, what's not there, and see if there is a value add in doing or building that what's not there. And post that, once you tie all these top 3 points together, see if there is a possibility where you can use your low code, no code capabilities for making it much smoother, right? Rather than just putting it as a point one, saying that, hey, I would like to go ahead with the hyper automation. Now let's build the solution backwards. So these are the 4 points I would say. And of course, topping it all, any transformation, unless and until there's a good interactive way a user can know about it, there is no way the transformation will be reaching to the audience it is intended to. So keep that in mind, that your interactive user experience is a key element, or a key it's a fabric of making sure your transformation is smooth and everybody understands what it is intended to do.
All right, excellent. Well, Shrikanth, thank you so much for taking the time to discuss this with me. Really interesting conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me over here.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks again to Shrikanth for joining. To read more of Shrikanth's thoughts on making process consumable, check out some of his writings. We've linked to them in the show notes, as well as a podcast episode we did with another member of the Mavim team recently, Leonard Van Leuven, and related blog posts from the Mavim team on Power Platform and cloud migration. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. You can also follow all of our updates on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.